Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first ever Southern Collegiate Esports live stream panel, where we will be talking all things collegiate esports, all things esports, and answering a bunch of your questions along the way. My name is Greg Adler. I'm the Director of Esports at the University of Texas at Dallas, and I'm going to be the moderator of this panel tonight. With me, I am joined by three very, very special guests, especially within the Southern esports scene, and three good friends of mine here. And I'm going to have themselves introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with Mike Aguilar. Go ahead, Mike.
Hey, as you said, I'm Mike Aguilar from the University of Oklahoma, slightly north of these three schools elsewhere here in the Brady Bunch squares. And I am the lead advisor and charged with development of both intercollegiate competitions and gaming energies on the University of Oklahoma's campus.
All right, great. And
Eugene.
Next, we're going to move on to Eugene Fryer. Go ahead, Eugene.
Hi, everybody. My name is Eugene Fryer. I'm the Executive Director of Esports and Recreation at Texas Wesleyan University in Fort Worth, working on the competitive teams, content creation side of things, community program, and our new esports communications degree that we started a couple weeks ago.
Nice.
Will be live summer 2020.
Let's go. All right, and last and certainly not least, Dylan Ray. Go ahead, Dylan.
Hi, I'm Dylan Ray, and I'm the esports coordinator for the University of North Texas. I manage the varsity program as well as our facilitation with the UNT Esports Sports Club, and just help everything move forward here on UNT campus here in Denton.
Okay, great. So, like I said before, this live stream is essentially going to be in a panel format. We have a bunch of predetermined questions that we'll be talking about, but we will definitely be opening discussion based on your questions in chat. So if you have any questions, make sure you type them in chat. We're going to write them down and come back to them, maybe answer a couple of them along the way. So it's very interactive. We want you to share your thoughts, ask any questions, anything you want to do to get involved. We definitely encourage it. All right, so we're going to get started here, and we're going to start off with a really nice general overview question here. I know something we often get asked a lot, and that is, what is the role of an esports director or a program director, or what is the role within your collegiate organization? And we're actually going to start off here with Mike. So what are your thoughts, Mike?
I'm going to start off with the worst answer ever is we facilitate playing video games, which is never the correct answer for this from anybody. But essentially, I'm looking at organic and real opportunities that are naturally just kind of grassroots energies on the campuses to help elevate them from kind of facilitating that community engagement piece that the university mission always has for the student experience, all the way to representing the university in as many energies as possible, from competitive energies to shoutcasting development to streaming entertainment energies to also reaching out in our backyard for K through 12 development, at-risk youth, and just catering to a lot of fun-loving gamers. So we'll do anything from obviously Smash Weeklies, which we have the biggest one in the state, hosted on OU's campus, pushing closer to 70 to 100 every Friday. Today, actually, we're hosting a League of Legends tournament with our partnership Get Wrecked in Oklahoma, and just looking at every opportunity, both academic, both just community, both social, and then anything and everything under the sun, which is a very big task. And I guarantee you, all other three people in this stream will agree that we don't sleep often, and when we do, it's still got so many things going on in circles. But that's kind of what I do. It's very macro, a lot of things going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Dylan, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think what you very much hit on the fact is that we create a ecosystem on a college campus that allows people to push themselves to be the best that they can be, so we can create a competitive program so our students can compete across the country against other universities, but also so that we tap into all of the great minds that are on a college campus that can try out their different skill sets. So whether they're in media arts, that they can get their hands on doing production, for various social content that we push out, or casting if you're in journalism, or just any kind of skill set, and kind of apply it to esports, and kind of see what that looks like on a college campus, and creating all those opportunities for students to really push themselves and grow.
Yeah, I think one thing you hit as a whole, both you and Mike hit very well, is just esports isn't just about the competitive aspect of the games. There's so much involved in it. And Eugene, I know you have a really special program down there at Texas Wesleyan. Can you kind of go into more detail about how you kind of incorporate those ideals and just overall into what you're kind of got going on?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like both Mike and Dylan, well, and you said, Greg, it's about a lot more than just the competitive side of gaming, and esports. That's a very important part of it, of course. But it's a lot of stuff around it as well. I know some that's already been touched on is the content creation, streaming, digital media, all that kind of stuff. But it really is a way to, it's community at its core to me, that can be leveraged in an educational way with students in a variety of ways. If you look at the competitive side, teaching students communication skills, as well as skill acquisition and development for in-game, but that's the same for learning how to use OBS and Skype and set up a setup like this. It's the same for hosting events on campus. Like Mike mentioned, they had the largest Smash event in OU, in the state at OU. The students that got to do that are starting to build out their resume and their interview talking points in a big way by talking about the logistics of an event like that as well. And it all applies to what students are learning in the classroom, just in a practical application way, in something that they're passionate about. So it's about finding ways to engage with students based on their passions in a way that's going to help them 5-10 years after they graduate. And it's exciting, it's exhausting, it's very, very worth it.
Yeah, and I think especially at this level, I mean, just the idea of collegiate esports as a whole being so new. I mean, there's so many new paths and things we're learning about every single day, and so many just different routes to take and new ideas coming up. So that kind of leads us into our next question here, which is what makes collegiate esports unique? You know, what makes the difference from whether it be a pro league or a high school league? You know, what makes it unique and what makes it special? I'm actually going to come back to you, Dylan, here on this one.
Okay, sure. So I think what is unique about collegiate esports is the simple fact that our students are students while they're trying to do all of these amazing things. So they're juggling a lot all at once. You know, they're putting in a lot of dedicated time to practice, to compete. And during the day, they also go to school and they have homework and they might be involved in other activities. And so what I think is awesome about it and also very kind of interesting and challenging is that your students aren't 100% dedicated to esports, so you can't do a lot of traditional techniques that were involved in like a professional organization. Your collegiate teams have limitations and you have to work within those kind of confines of how you manage and develop your program. And so I think that's kind of one of the interesting aspects about collegiate esports is that all of your students are multifaceted, and how you juggle that and how you manage it is what makes it pretty awesome, unique.
Can I add one thing on that real fast?
Of course.
I think one thing that I know we're talking about compared to like the professional esports scene, but one thing that we have to juggle a lot with our roles dealing with collegiate esports is the perception of parents and senior administrators on campus.
Yes.
If we were all athletic directors or coaches for football, basketball teams, and we were telling our students we want you in the gym lifting weights X amount of hours a week and running X amount of hours a week and practicing X amount of hours a week, that's more readily understood. But we have to balance that out with, it's not just playing video games. There's a lot more that goes into it and dealing with the optics of it, in addition to helping make sure that our students are students first.
Yeah, and I think you guys you hit a lot of really, really interesting points there. I especially like the idea of it just kind of, you're not necessarily just forming the teams, you're kind of preparing these students for professional life and giving them this experience, especially within esports at a collegiate level. You're giving them this experience that they really wouldn't get anywhere else. And so you're, while they're taking these classes, they're getting that behind the scenes, what the programs are like, what it's all like, and kind of using that to build themselves into the future. So kind of going into that, what would you guys say are the biggest differences between different programs? What do you think are some things that you see some colleges doing that some others aren't, or vice versa?
I'll start off on that. And so the first thing I want to highlight with that specific question is I know I'm different than all three of you. So my program is actually housed and sponsored under centralized IT. Whereas you guys, I know UTD, UNT, you guys are absolutely under athletics, I believe. And Eugene, I don't remember where you fell. But it shows kind of just even in the small kind of radius how different you can approach it. And it also depends on the tier of the university that's coming into the scene and how they're approaching it. But you look at other schools in this segment where like Utah, who's completely built into engineering because of their game development program. And so there's no cookie cutter design to this. And that's one of the hardest things to sell to administration when they automatically come up with, oh, we have this great topic at esports. Here's all the analytics and the pro scene and the revenue and these very top level optics, and the reality is that you still have to meld it to the culture of your specific university. There's so much stuff in California that absolutely, when we're talking about collegiate esports, it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. Well, we're not in California, and that's the thing is that while it's amazing over there, it works for them culturally, and it's hard to bring it back into this region. I imagine North Texas being a little bit easier than Oklahoma in that regard. But those are some of those challenges when we have those differences, is that the way that we're structurally integrated into the universities is completely different from one another.
Eugene, Dylan, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like every program is going to be a little bit different. We're actually not even in athletics here at UNT. We're actually in recreational sports under the Division of Student Affairs. And so that creates its own set of, advantages that, our particular program brings to the table. It allows us to collaborate with a lot of other departments on campus pretty easily, as well as tap into just kind of programming for students as a whole, especially with our relationship with the sports club. And so it creates kind of an interesting perspective, and also allows us to offer different types of programming. So for instance, our students get like workouts on a weekly basis, being a part of our program, because we're in a rec center. So it kind of creates a neat opportunity for our students to kind of push themselves in a new and kind of interesting way. But I think that's kind of the amazing part about esports on a college campus, is that right now there's no set determined way that has been proven like the best effective. It really depends on each university and kind of what esports does for that university and how it can help their students.
Well, and that's the interesting thing too. Like if you look at where, like both Mike and Dylan are kind of talking about, where universities house their esports program, it's largely dependent right now on who came up with the idea. Whereas if someone came up with the idea to add a football team to a university, they're not going to say, where should we put that? That's going to go athletics. But
education.
Yeah, exactly. IT. The no clear path nature of current collegiate esports means that it can be on the academic side, it can be athletics, it can be student affairs, and that then informs differences with programs. When I first gathered information to pitch a program on our campus, we gathered the information to give to athletics for them to start the program. And it was strictly competitive. It was teams like we have a baseball team, we have a football team, we're going to have a League of Legends team. But they didn't have people that understood esports or extra people to start working on this. So then it was decided it was going to be in student affairs. And then we iterated on the idea. It wasn't just about competitive teams. We wanted our competitive teams to be strong. We wanted them to be successful. But then the student affairs side of things was, well, what else do we do as well? How can this be educational? But there are some schools that it's just competitive. And that doesn't mean one way's right, one way's wrong. It's just all very different right now.
Yeah, one thing I've found to be unique, especially with us being under athletics, is a lot of times you'd find athletic programs more so or less so open to taking it under them in the division they're based on. So UTD is Division 3. And the policies from Division 3 to Division 2 and 1 are drastically different.
Oh, God.
Yep. So you see, so it's almost not necessarily easier, but the route is more accessible in Division 3 to add an esports program into athletics. Whereas, Oklahoma or UNT, it's a lot more steps, and the logistics behind it make it a lot tougher.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that.
Yeah, Mike knows. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a blessing and a curse when this topic.
Yeah, and I think that and again, a lot of it comes down to what Eugene said, and where did the idea start? Where did it come from? Where did it originate? And I think that really speaks true to a lot of programs across the country. So kind of going into our next topic here, kind of off of this one. So with the current format that it is, the NCAA does not technically have any rights over esports in any kind of capacity. So where do you guys see it happening? Do you prefer the way it is now with the game developers kind of running the leagues and it being through independent leagues, or would you want NCAA to come in and get a hold of everything here?
For me, so we're not technically NCAA on my campus. We're NAIA, which is a different classification. But that being said, I don't know if I would want the rules that go along with NCAA and NAIA to have the impact as they currently are. That would drastically change a lot of what we do with collegiate esports. But the counterpoint to that is, depending on what league you look at for collegiate esports, I wish they were more structured and a bit more. I know a thing that all of us have talked about before. It would be great if we could have schedules right now for our fall seasons. Yeah. We could start advertising that on our campuses. We could start telling our recruits, our current students, here's when we're going to play, telling their families, all that kind of stuff. But realistically, for our fall seasons, we're going to get that information mid to late August.
Right.
Right. I think if the NCAA or another established governing body like that was more involved, that would be a positive change. But right now, that positive change would come with more negative changes. So for me, it's kind of conflicting.
I think it's great right now that there's not a lot of regulations because it allows universities to experiment and try things. Because I think, like we've already said, there's not really a proven method that works. And I think right now, having little to no rules or having tournament organizers manage things is a good system to get universities' feet wet and decide, oh yeah, like, should we do it this way? Or, ooh, that was a horrible idea, let's go this direction. And it kind of gives some free form to universities to kind of choose and pick how it works best for them. But I feel like later down the road, I think for where I think collectively we hope esports goes, I feel like a governing regulatory body will be necessary to bring it more light, more attention, and more structure.
I'm going to come into this as Division I Power 5 school that has tons of obstacles at that level when we have this discussion specifically. But one of the things that I want to echo is the need for governance at some point will absolutely be a necessity because, again, the first questions when you're at the ground floor of these topics and these conversations is, what are other universities doing? Instead of universities just embracing it and saying, let's truly innovate something from scratch. Sure, there's a couple examples out there, some really good ones, but they don't always directly translate. And so having a governing body is like getting spoon-fed kind of a set of rules of how you can operate, and it provides scope, it provides perspective into what it can and does look like at some level. The other side of the fence is here quoting the actual president of the NCAA back in January, where he criticizes and kind of says that the NCAA is kind of interested in esports, but anything that is violent, we have no interest in, which is kind of hypocritical in my opinion, because then we start talking about something that to talk about that OU's known for, and that's definitely not for the faint of heart when you're on the field. So those types of things, it's kind of like it's just more opportunity that education has to happen on all levels. It doesn't matter if it's the powers that be right now, the generations that are younger, all of it has to be educated on multiple fronts. The conversation might change from administrative to future potential student, but there has to be education on all fronts at this stage. And so right now, to echo what Dylan said, this is exploratory time. This is the time before the NCAA. This is the time before the NBA, NFL, MLS, and all these things. And to think about that is really scary because we've, schools like OU have only operated under NCAA governance for how long? And they're so used to just being spoon-fed this governance rule set that says, okay, well, we know within these walls is how we can operate. Well, that doesn't even exist right now, and that's hard for a lot of university administration to buy into, and to literally commit brain cycles to even saying, what? Like, I don't know how to think like the time before the NCAA. What do you mean? And so that's it's definitely an uphill battle, but it is a nice time to be in this development and this tier, because we're going to be the ones that lay that infrastructure. We're going to be the ones that are crashing and burning and learning the lessons and coming back and saying, okay, because at the end of the day, brands like OU, I need Oklahoma State University. I need the University of Texas at Austin. I need those brands because it can galvanize this topic as we fold more and more universities into this, and kind of break that predefined conference things, a Big 12, Big 10, Pac-12, these types of conferences that are also a little bit behind the times and thought processes, so that we can elevate each other at this time. And so that's one of my favorite things about this, is that while the brand, I know there's tons of alum in North Texas. There's tons of alum all over Texas that wear this logo on their head, chest, whatever else, or tattoos even. But at the same time, it is an opportunity for these types of collaboration that say, how can we use this to also elevate each other, and vice versa. So like going to UNT a month ago and competing with UT Austin and UT Dallas and Texas Westland, and seeing all these energies and these things coming around is it's really exciting in that regard. Even though it's tenuous amounts of work, it's really exciting because sure, 5 years from now, this is going to look completely different.
Yeah, and I think one thing, across the board, you just get the feeling that people, they know it's coming and they want it to happen, but it has to happen in the right way. And I think a lot of people worry about when the NCAA gets involved, that people that may be players that also stream, amateurism. There's so many different things involved that the positives are substantial, and it can really change the scene as we know it, but it has to be the right way, and it has to be the benefit of the students and what works best, for the overall. And I think it's going to take a lot of work to get there, but we'll kind of see along that path there. So going here into our next topic, talking about just the overall esports as a whole. So what would you gentlemen say does the industry need to do to further elevate the status of collegiate esports? How do they help develop the program, or how does your program get exposure? How does it grow? What are you guys looking for to happen as a whole?
I think one thing that would truly help is more localized, like semi-regional events. So if you did more like either bowls or conferences that allowed more teams to kind of get limelight status, I think that would truly help. Because when you do one national bracket where basically 2 to 4 teams are going to make it to a physical location and be broadcasted on Twitch, there's only a few universities that are going to truly get that big name recognition status. But if you did like quadrant kind of bowls, or kind of more kind of like live tournaments or broadcasted tournaments on a big level throughout the year, I think that would give more universities limelight and opportunities to really showcase their abilities and their branding. So more events, I guess, is probably my thing.
I'm going to come in on the flip side of that and talk about the academic mission of the universities, which is one of the biggest missed opportunities in esports and knowledge. If you have access to resources like Gartner or EDUCAUSE, which are where a lot of publications are for doctorates and tenured professors at universities, and you type in the word esports, there's less than 10 articles, and that's a global database. That should tell you on the academic opportunities just how much real tangible opportunities that we can instill on the entire scope of the university's mission. So while we're offering this specific opportunity, expand it into almost every college on our university's campuses. And there's tangible, logical thought processes in each of them. Journalism is one of the biggest ones. Anything with journalism, communications is one of the hugest academic opportunities in esports, because without shoutcasters and without that front-facing production with those play-by-plays, analytical review, and those things, well, esports at that point is just gaming. and that's the differentiating. Gaming is playing basketball with your friends on a local court, and the NBA Finals is esports. All that production, all of that. And so that's opportunity for journalistic practicum. That's opportunity for business practicum research. And these are all kinds of opportunities that are missing in the academic mission. And that's one of the hardest struggles. While we have plenty of hard struggles, getting the academics to buy in and do research on this, and showing them that if you're teaching sportscasting, which OU teaches a sportscasting degree, well, sportscasting and shoutcasting are 80% the exact same curriculum. The only difference is the subject matter expertise. It's color casting, play-by-play, after-action review, analytical processing in real time. It's the exact same degree. And so those are the types of missions that are an additional one on top of it, but can help elevate it, because with research, then comes justification, then it comes foundation for us to stand on. So-and-so research produced this result, and so forth. And it becomes a standard in the academic realm, which furthers our mission and our agendas as a whole.
Yeah, especially.
And what y'all two just said is exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I think one thing in particular that I want the industry to kind of realize more is that, while it's moving in that direction, there's not necessarily an esports degree right now. So it's not like, okay, if I want to get involved in esports as a professional, I get this degree or I get this degree. So, like, as an example, I got my degree in music education. But I followed my passion along the way, and I was just involved with it my whole life. And so because of that, I want these industries to reach out to these collegiate programs and be like, okay, we have this opening that is esports related. Is there someone within your program that has this experience being involved at a collegiate level, who's training to be a young professional, who's going out into the adult life, into the adult world, that could fit this position that we need? We see this program and we see what they've been involved there. Are there people that you can kind of help, send our way? Are there people that we can help develop maybe in an internship or even at a career level? And I think that's one thing that I think the industry can really do to benefit collegiate esports, is give them those opportunities, whether they be an internship during or a job after, or just experience as a whole. Give them that experience and that opportunity because of the program they're involved with at a collegiate level. It's different than a pro level, because you're learning, you're there training to get a degree in whatever it may be, but you may also be largely passionate about esports and also want to follow that path. And by being on a team or being a writer for a team or a broadcaster, that might be your connection, and that might be your only thing you need to get that job or that internship you really dream about or want to. So I think that's one thing the industry can really do to help change, is just look for more talent within these programs that have been growing. So going on to our next point here.
I think.
Oh, go ahead, Eugene.
Sorry. I think I agree with what all y'all are saying, like, fully. One little tweak to what Mike was saying, and the thing that we're trying to work on my campus right now, is having academics drive not only the research boat, but the curriculum development piece, to provide the opportunities that you're talking about, Greg. Not to take anything away from students that aren't majoring in a certain thing that are interested in esports, but to have a path laid out for people that are interested in going into this field. A thing my old boss used to always say is, you can't be what you can't see. I know that there are a lot of students that I've talked to that are prospective recruits for our program that love games, that love esports, but that are maybe not that good. But they don't know, even though they don't know that they could try to get into casting, or they don't know they could get into stream management or in-game, like basically being a camera person in Overwatch or something for some of the leagues. So providing those opportunities through the curriculum on a university, I think, opens up the doors for people that are in high school that don't realize that there's a path they can take to get there, to end up in that as a job.
Right.
All right, and I think that's very true, especially when you want to build, the foundation from not just collegiate to pro or college to professional life, but high school to college to professional life, and kind of growing the spectrum as a whole. I think that's a really good point. So looking here to our next question, and this is actually kind of one asked by a viewer. I want it was a good day, kind of ties into this here. How do those looking at collegiate esports get themselves known, or kind of off of that, what is the best way to get involved, whether it be with the program or to get themselves as a part of a team here?
There are a lot of awesome recruiting platforms that are out there right now that are specifically like esports related. So like Be Recruited, I know is one of them that we take a look at that are out there. But also just like reaching out to us on our respective Discord channels is definitely something that we take very seriously. So I think just reaching out to us. We're usually pretty approachable people. All four of these guys are really approachable and easy to ask questions and all that stuff. So I definitely would recommend that.
Mike, Eugene,
Agree.
any thoughts?
I definitely agree. Just reach out, ask questions, connect however you can.
I'm going to take a moment and also put that into perspective, tying back onto the trend of this, is that there's so much opportunity to build things in this topic. Is there is no one way. There is no traditional athletics type scouting programs. There's none of that. There's no jobs that are doing that yet. Those days will absolutely come. The benefit with esports and games in general is that it's just a giant computer program and a database to collect analytical data. So collecting strategy and or understanding some of the players' statistics and abilities is a lot easier in this topic, I think, than traditional sports in that regard. But then it comes down to character, soft skills, team development, compromise, give and take, and those things. Because another thing that a lot of people don't think about is that for many, not all, but many of these high-performing competitors and gamers and such have never been exposed to competitive athletics. They haven't been on teams in that way. And so from that same standpoint, you're at 17, 18 years old, you've never been on a team. Well, that's a whole new paradigm to learn on top of this, because yes, you play Overwatch and you play, ranked play. You may have formed teams a little bit here and there, but this is much different than that. Because it's based on metrics. You're accountable to somebody. Eventually, you're going to get to that point where you're going to have to produce wins, just like any athletics programs. Those days are coming. Hopefully not for a while completely, but those days are coming, and that's eventually what is going to be an arm of every single program that's being developed, no matter who it is and where it is the performance of those teams. So just wanted to highlight the fact that there is no single way, and it typically just means reach out. Anything, social media, anywhere. It all comes back to us.
Yeah, I think looking at it specifically from the other aspect of if you're looking, like if your primary goal was to get on a collegiate team, and I think this kind of goes into a lot of what Mike was saying, is that, it's a lot less about the game knowledge and a lot more about the individual. Are you willing to learn? Are you toxic when things get rough? Are you willing to work? Are you willing to adapt? And I think it's big things as a whole that kind of strengthen your character that people look at to add to their program. Are you the person that when things get hard, that tough, you're the one who's like, hey, it's all right, guys, let's get it going, we can do this, or you're the one to just shut down and immediately not really do anything anymore. Yeah. And I think it's those kind of ideals as a whole and those kind of just character aspects that a lot of us are specifically looking for just in any situation.
Right. Don't be the guy that's getting YouTube videos made about how you get triggered on Apex Legends right now. That's definitely the wrong direction.
Yeah, if you'd be recording me playing Apex, that'd probably be me. So I'm glad there's no footage of that.
Nobody let Greg on their team.
All right, great. So want to take a different approach here for this next question, and something that actually I find to get asked about a lot, and that's the viability of professional teams or professional organizations recruiting players from the collegiate level and kind of their routes to get there. So what are your guys' thoughts on the opportunities for collegiate players to go into professional play?
I think it presents a new pipeline for professional organizations. I think it'll take some time for it to be a developed thing that happens more often, but I think one of the huge advantages of students that are coming out of a university is that not only have they been working on their craft, if they're actively in an esports program, they're working on their craft, but they also, got a full-fledged degree. So when they go into your organization and they play really hard for a couple of years and they get into the quote-unquote retirement age of 26 or 27, you now have a player that can do something else for your organization. Maybe they can do broadcast content. Maybe they can help you out with your business side of things. Their education background leading into your professional organization could be a huge asset while they maintain the personality that got you attention in the first place as a player. So I think much more in the future, it's a possibility, but I think the industry has to adapt a little bit, because right now most of the path is amateurism and or scouting talent when they're really young, maybe even before they graduate high school. So it would take kind of a shift for these professional organizations for it to, I think, take place on a much more frequent level. But I definitely think it's a strong possibility in the future.
Yeah, one thing that it definitely does do at the collegiate level, and I definitely agree with Dylan on everything you said, but I think one thing it definitely does do is it puts you in that team environment. So like Mike said, for a lot of these guys, they weren't necessarily involved with athletics, so they haven't been in that team environment. But being a part of that collegiate program, you work with a set of guys that you may not get along with perfectly, but you have to figure out how to make it work. You have your weekly practices. You're trying to improve as a team. So it gives you that experience. So when you go to try out for a team, or you go to get, to any kind of recruiting kind of event for these teams, you're able to show them that you have those aspects already learned, and that's something you don't necessarily need to be taught. And maybe the most important thing for you is some like small individual mechanical things. So I think they're, like Dylan said, it's definitely down the line, but it definitely does provide a lot of benefits right now that I think can be correlated back and forth.
Definitely agree.
Okay, so going on to our next topic here, and this is one that I think goes a lot into the aspects of, esports is a lot more than just the competitive scene, and that is, what other opportunities does esports and just the topic of esports bring to higher education landscape? And are there any specific K through 12 tie-ins we could see right now?
I'll kick this one off. I have a very strong academic background in this stuff, and this is kind of where my passion is for development in this. If we reverse sports entertainment, traditional sports entertainment, it is heavy journalism practicum opportunities. I mentioned it earlier in the stream, and I'll mention it again here. And one of the best things that I did to kind of educate some of the administration at OU was I took a highlight reel from SportsCenter, and then I took a highlight reel from Worlds League of Legends finals, and I paused them every 30 minutes, and I said, what are all the jobs we just saw? And anything from branding, marketing, the photographers on the edge, the writers after the fact, the venue operations, all these things are recreated and reborn in this topic. They're all viable again. They're all necessary again to stabilize the industry. And the purpose of higher education is to produce those professionals that help stabilize and progress industries. That is the number one mission of every university. At least for me it is. And that's what I hope it would be. And so that's kind of those bigger opportunities. And when you think of it in that context, then almost every degree has an opportunity here. You can go into social work, which has that K through 12 and at-risk youth opportunity. Journalism is self-explanatory. For schools, again, like Utah, I referenced with engineering and computer game design, business with sports team management, marketing in there, journalism then you start talking about sports medicine and nutritional sciences, and all of it has a logical thought process. It's not even a far-fetched. It's like right in front of you when you think of it in the standpoint of what does it take to stabilize this industry. And so the tie-ins for K through 12 is that K through 12 is coming up just as fast as collegiate. And for a lot of times they have even less hurdles to overcome, but it's because their scope is going to be narrower. And that also has the opportunities when we talk about the tech centers too. When we talk about things like creative media production and digital video production types things, and those things are absolutely necessary. Every time you see a highlight blurb or a replay that has analytics in it, well, that's creative media production in real time. I mean, that's that job in real time. And so the K through 12 and at-risk youth opportunities are monumental, because when you were that young, what did you do with the majority of your time? You played games. At least for the more male-dominated demographics, played games. And for the at-risk youth, yes, they did too. And I used to work for a public or a juvenile facility here in Oklahoma City, and sadly, a lot of those that was one of those things that could unify those kids, and kind of calm them down. As long as you were there to say, hey, it's okay if you lost the game. understand competitive, come back, get better, do it again. And so in that spawns all kinds of opportunities of impacting and philanthropy and other energies that can help stabilize and grow visibility with programming.
I think we have kind of going along with what Mike said, a great opportunity to. I understand before I say this might sound corny and very hyperbolic, but really transform higher education in a lot of ways with programs like this. With programs like this that are done right, which is one thing I appreciate about talking to y'all. None of us have just teams on our campus. We have esports programs. But schools that have programs serve a broader base of students. One of the things that I talked about with the senior administrators on my campus when I was first pitching this, we're really, in a lot of ways, and not across the board, but I think a large amount of students, at least on our campus, that are being served by this program, that are engaging with this program, that are learning from this program, didn't really have their interest represented on campus before. Some of those students, very, very intelligent, but not really engaged on campus. You think about a college campus, the high academic achieving 3.8, 4.0 students, they have research opportunities with faculty, they have their high level honors program, stuff that challenges them and engages them. You think about the lower end, the students that are struggling, they have those developmental programs, they have mandatory tutoring, supplemental instruction, all that kind of stuff, but extra things to engage them. Then there's the folks that are in the middle that sometimes they're not deemed to be at risk by a university because they're a 2.8 student and they could probably do better, but they don't have a reason to do better in their mind because of their personal stuff that why do I care? Why am I in college? A program like this, like what all of us are doing, has the chance to engage this student, to get them the mentoring from a program director, coordinator, coach, whatever it might be, to get them the camaraderie, the closeness of being part of a team, part of a program, teaches the soft skills, teaches the communication skills, critical thinking skills, all that kind of stuff. And it can be huge, long term. Combine that with what Mike was saying about how this impacts, and not just from a program point of view or a team point of view, but how it impacts high school, middle school, elementary school. I know it was really pivotal for me last spring, April 2018. I was speaking at a career day at Louisville Elementary School. Really, really quick side story. And I was in a 5th grade class, and I was a rotation of I spoke to 5 different classes. And a good friend of mine is one of the assistant principals out at that school. And she got to come in during one of the classes and took some pictures, and then I met up with her afterwards. And in the class that she came into, 3 separate students would not stop talking. Like, they weren't being rude or anything, but they were like, oh. And as you know, it's a 5th grade class, so they're talking about Fortnite exclusively. But we're, talking, laughing, joking, all that kind of stuff. Then afterwards, when I spoke with my friend Lisa, she asked me, she said, were those students talking the whole time? I was like, yeah, they really were. The girl in the back and the 2 guys up front, we're talking the whole time. And Lisa explained to me, the girl in the back never talks in class. She has a very, very rough home life. And she is just silent in class. The 2 up front are always picking fights and arguing with people. But I wouldn't have known that because I was talking about stuff that was relevant to them, and they were just locked in. If we can find a way on that level, the elementary, middle school, high school level, to lock in with those students that are on the fringes and provide opportunities for them when they get to college, that's where I think it can be truly transformational.
Dude, that's so beautiful. Quit.
One example I have, kind of going off of that in a more specific way, is that recently we had McKinney Boyd. They have their electronics club, especially their gaming club. They came and visited our campus, and they checked out our space and everything like that. We gave them a tour around the campus. And one of the students came up to me and explained to me that he was currently in a digital media class where they were using video editing software, and they gave him a school project where they had certain guidelines they had to go through. But what he did for his project was he took his League of Legends montage plays and made them into a montage. Well, I should say his bad plays. That was his whole thing. It was his fails. So he took all of his bad plays and did video editing and made it, and went through all of the steps, and it was hilarious and it was so well done. And at the end of it, not even connecting to esports at all, he's like, I really like doing this. This is something I actually want to do. He's like, I've started looking on Reddit to see if there's people that are looking for me to people to edit their videos for their YouTube channels, which there are. And so, it's a connection like that they apply what they're learning in school and apply the classes they're taking to that passion, and then they're able to go out and find those opportunities. So next thing we know, he's going to be editing montages for Double Lift or something like that. Yeah. But it's giving them that experience combination with passion and what they're learning, and it really turns into something special.
Yeah, I think what is truly magical about how esports can kind of transform the higher educational landscape is that it provides a whole, like, kind of like what everyone has been talking about, but it provides a new way for students to experience and be a part of school pride at all levels.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if it's middle school, high school, or college. As a program manager, the probably the most impactful thing that happened to me this year was a student saying, I never really would have ever thought that I would have been an official athlete for my university. It was just never something that would have crossed their mind. But now they get this jersey with their name on the back, and they're representing the university, and it's something that's truly special, and it really kind of gives universities a new opportunity to connect with these students and give them something to be proud of. And any program at a university, always wants something like that kind of glues a student to the campus and has a deep connection to it. And I think that's an awesome part of esports for high school, middle school, and for college.
I want to wrap up Dylan's segment with one small story. As I was doing research in the very early part of our development at OU, where we were looking at TESPA and we're looking at what they're doing. It was during Hearthstone finals, and I remember watching the captain of the Ohio State team decimate the Arizona State team from his wheelchair with only the use of his right hand, yet wearing his university on his chest. And I can't imagine what that student felt in that moment. Yeah. And I mean, he wiped the floor with them, so it was pretty good. But in that same moment, that's that message when people are like, well, should we even care about this? Well, if we break it down in the collegiate world, we have the opportunity to really impact this in this way. But there is no entry barrier for gender, heritage, color, creed, discipline, whatever you care about, what you look like. None of that matters. Yes, there are some performance analytic opportunities in the competitive scene that you do have to be good at, but then there's all those other ancillary things that make esports viable, and the journalism and the writing and the photography and the videography and the streaming and the shoutcasting and the production crews, and go on and on and on about the things that esports as an industry needs, and that's what we all get to create and empower.
Yeah, before we went live earlier, Eugene had the quote, and I'm sure he heard it from somewhere, which was the name on the back of the jersey isn't more important than the one you're representing on the front. And I think it's a really great quote. It's cheesy, and we all know it is, but it's a fantastic quote. And I think it speaks true to what we're saying. So, yeah. Great. So we're going to move on to actually a kind of way different topic here. And this is something that actually can be discussed at all levels of esports as a whole, whether it be collegiate or professional. And that's on just performance-enhancing drugs, or as an off-topic of it, esports sportwear, or things to improve your play outside of just the practice or putting the time in your teams. So, guys, any thoughts on that?
I will. So, I'll touch on like the gear and equipment side of things. I do think it's really important that and this is probably more so for organizations that are interested in like creating a facility, it is really important that your gear and equipment stay relatively the same, because students, they have their own kind of their own play styles and their own things. But anytime you create a lot of change, is kind of like a possibility for screw ups or mess ups. So if you're creating a facility, it's really important that you have a lot of standard type stuff. So if it's having students practice multiple times a week in the same area, making sure that each experience is the same. So it kind of helps kind of condition people, just kind of like an athletic or practice facility. All that stuff is really, really important.
I found one thing that's really unique, especially since we've started our program, is I've reached out to a lot of different business or corporations, or just that have ideas and things along those lines, that have their product they're trying to get out there. And I think a big thing for me personally is does this product, or is whatever they were trying to use, is it truly going to benefit them enough to make a difference in not just like their gaming, but as a whole? Can they really use this in maybe their everyday lives that also applies to gaming? Like as an example, I have a friend of mine who has really bad arthritis in his left wrist. on his left hand, and he got a special mouse pad that was designed by a company for that reason, and it completely changed the way he games.
That's awesome.
And I think it's things like that that can make a big difference. And I think especially with gaming, I mean, even if you compare it to traditional sports in a lot of the way, every baseball player has the same bat they'll use, the same glove every single time. It's something they're used to. Very much like what Dylan said. And esports and just gaming in general, you want those things that are going to make you feel most comfortable, and just as a whole, the continuation and the continuity from game to game and from playing to playing that'll really kind of make you stand out in that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I know one of the on the more like equipment side of things, but maybe a bit of a different look to it. One of the things that we're looking into right now, we want to make sure that our peripherals and all that kind of stuff are really good for the machines that we have for our players, but also looking into getting stuff like Fitbit type devices to help encourage the holistic wellness period. One of the things that we talk about a lot with recruits, we talked about a lot with our players, especially early on, is there's a difference between playing games like this and playing games the way you're supposed to, like with posture, with sitting upright. As the games get longer and longer and longer, the weaker your core is, the weaker your body is, it's going to impact your brain. Healthy body, healthy brain. So trying to do some stuff from an equipment point of view that is a reminder for the students and our benchmarks to hit as well. Like if we have a Fitbit, making sure that like if we have practices at this time, when you guys show up to practice, you should have this many steps or whatever it might be to help kind of encourage that overall, because we feel that would help in game as well. That's one of the things we're trying to figure out right now, how to do that, what to get, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a really interesting almost subtopic off of that is, where do you create that balance between having a healthy life and just being able to game and put that time into esports, especially at a collegiate level, being able to balance those, those two lives between the two. And then, like you said, Eugene, a lot of it is correlated with each other, healthy mind, healthy body. And so especially when you get into these longer sessions, like you said, it definitely starts to show. So any other thoughts on that, guys, before we move on? Okay, so moving on to our final topic here before we open it up to a couple of questions that we definitely have been writing down, so I'm very excited to get to. And this is a very overarching question here. So gentlemen, feel free to take this as you will. But where do you see the future of collegiate esports going? And kind of where do you see it being in the next maybe 1 year, 5 years, and 10 years?
In 10 years, we'll all be enemies. Right now, we're the best of friends. I think we're going to see you're going to see it mimic, and it's just by default because of the way that people consume their energy, consume entertainment, and just kind of treat like sports entertainment, because it does mimic it. It's not exactly the same. I'm not going to say it's the same, but there's a lot of similarities between the two, entertainment and sports entertainment, and then the esports in the top tier. And in that same realm, you start to create a little bit of elitist infrastructure, because that's just the way it is. Let's highlight the star. Let's highlight that person that's doing it. We look at Faker with League of Legends and just how hyped he was, on those first couple years, and that's going to really kind of promote this this highlight your stars kind of mentality. And it's just going to be because it's easy to digest, it's easy to follow, instead of seeing all these underworking pieces. And that's part of the reason why it's such a hard challenge to sell the idea of everything aside from the competitive gaming energies. They're not seeing all those ancillary other topics, because in sports entertainment, we don't care about those either, but they're still viable jobs. And so I think that's where we're going to head. And probably the 5-year mark, it'll become more and more apparent as we become considerably more competitive on the university level, not in esports, but in the sense of come to my university because of this program. No, UNT's esports program offers this. No, UTD's esports program offers this. And now the universities have a whole new metric and a whole new opportunity to compete with other universities and absolutely value it in the mainstream thought processes at the highest tiers of administration. It's an inevitable roadmap as it continues to gain more and more momentum and more buy-in and more virality. And especially as we start to see the attrition of older thought processes and older administration leave universities, lead esports organizations, or not esports organizations, but the governing bodies like the NCAA, for instance, where you start to bring in the generations that are right now, and the generations like us at the top of the developments coming into the power of influence and being able to say, well, I represent the University of Oklahoma. I represent, Texas West, and I represent UTD. This is what we're doing. Well, no one else is telling us what to do, so now we get to create that. And so I think that's the 5-year mark from right now, where we are exponentially more powerful than we are now. And then the 10 years, we're at each other's throats in the most healthy of competitive ways that universities should do so, which is innovate.
No, but that's really, like, I know Mike said it initially, like, joking, but that is one of the things that I've loved about the esports, just collegiate scene right now so far, is when I was putting my program together, and I'm sure you guys had the same experience, if you ask people from different schools, hey, can you give me information on this? It's like, oh, yeah, sure, yeah. I mean, we have the Discord set up with all of us and other folks with programs in Texas. That doesn't happen with basketball. That doesn't happen with golf teams. So I'm sure that will change down the line, but that's one thing that I love about it right now. One of the big things I see as far as the future of esports, especially on the college scene, is not that it would be a shift away side of it, but because the competitive piece will always be there. But I think schools will finally lock on to we have to build a program that can exist if all the games that people are playing today disappear tomorrow. And right now, some of the programs that exist lean heavily on, we have an Overwatch team and we have a League of Legends team, and we just have players to play on those teams. If Blizzard decides to pull a Heroes of the Storm on Overwatch, and that game just changes on the competitive scene, schools that just have Overwatch teams won't be as successful as schools that have Overwatch teams and analysts and casters and all those pieces that can then shift to whatever the new game is. So I think more well-rounded, more robust programs are what we're going to see in the future of collegiate esports.
Yeah, there's definitely that economy to kind of very much like an athletics program. You're going to have your basketball team, you're going to have your football team, you're going to have your tennis team in a way that you can capture the widest amount of interest in gamers, but as well as people that don't naturally identify as gamers. There's a reason that Rocket League is as popular as it is because it's a game that's incredibly easy to pick up and understand. And so every game has an opportunity to be something on a college campus, as long as there is the following as well as the sustainability of that game when students graduate. I think one thing I'm really, really excited about just even next year is to see all of the other universities that are going to start establishing programs. I think we're truly seeing a nice big momentum and wave of other universities that are attempting to figure out how do we put an esports program on our campus. And I think all of us have either helped out other universities or reached out and supported other universities in this endeavor. So we're really excited that UTA will be launching next year. So another neighbor is getting involved in this, because it only bolsters our position as well as esports managers. It just kind of further offers credibility to what we're doing, and kind of strengthens all of us as a whole, which is truly exciting to see. I think in about 5 years' time, I think very much talking about what Mike said, we're going to see a verdict take place from the NCAA as to what will officially be collegiate esports. I think within 5 years' time, we'll see that be officially defined, and so they'll have to navigate. Okay, do we outlaw amateurism on the collegiate level, and how does the path to pro recover from that process, or how does it adapt to that process? Are the essentially questions that will get answered within about 5 years' time. In 10 years' time, I think all of our dreams are for 10 years down the road is a student that's in middle school, might start playing a game. It might even be a different game 10 years from now, but maybe they start playing Rocket League in middle school, and they play it in high school, and then they try out to make it onto a collegiate team. and maybe someday have a shot at going pro, and having that true path to pro defined, just like you might see something in football, where the captain of the Rocket League team is just as influential as maybe the captain of the basketball team. I think that's something that we dream of, and we work really hard to try and craft and create, because it's something that we're all four of us are very passionate about seeing through. And I think it's someday it might be a true reality.
Yeah, kind of going off what Dylan said, as more of like a general stand, but I think the lines between esports and traditional sports are going to start to become blurrier and blurrier, and you're really going to start to see that connection more. I mean, you even see it this year with ESPN being involved with the whole test series down in Houston. I mean, that's a huge connection. Maybe it might not necessarily be like direct involvement like them hosting all of it, but the name is there, and that name recognition could be enough to get those that know nothing about it to start to follow it. And I think that's a really big thing that's going to start to change. I also think a really good point that Eugene brought up was the aspect of, will this game exist in 5 years? Will this game exist in 10 years? And that's something that these game developers, you start to see more and more of. It's their job to make games that do have that longevity now. Those games that in 5 or 6 years, they're still going to be playing those games. Like League of Legends has lasted for forever, largely because of the way Riot Games has supported the infrastructure. People like to question them all the time, but there's a reason it's still one of the most played games in the world, and that's because of the developer. And that kind of brings you into another topic, or kind of off of that, is something we've actually been really lucky to have, is that we've had local Dallas game developers contact me and be like, hey, we want your students to try our game. We made this game specifically to be an esports game, and we want your students to try this out. We want them to let us know what they think, because they have that experience, because it's what they're passionate about. So you're going to start to get more experienced people and opinions involved, and the games are going to start to be developed because of that. I mean, we're in a really interesting time right now, where battle royales are still fresh, but they're not necessarily a competitive game, and MOBAs are kind of dead, or dying, I should say. So it's like you're kind of going into that next generation of what's the next big game going to be. What's going to be that next game that takes everything by storm and really revolutionizes esports as we know it. So I think that's what I'm most excited for in 5 to 10 years. Yeah. And my last point is going off of what Mike said, in the aspect that in 10 years, when it becomes this NCAA regulated thing, that it's going to be competitive in a lot of ways. I think that really speaks to kind of what we're doing right now and what we're trying to make the industry be. What we want it to be. Like we are pre-NCAA right now, so it's like, what do we want NCAA to be? How do we want people to see our programs, and how do they want us to talk about them? We want more events like this collaboration. I mean, that's like, it essentially be like the head coaches of basketball for Villanova, UCLA, getting on a Skype call and having this conversation. We want esports to be associated with that communication, that overall flexibility, and that fact that we're in on the ground level really helps a lot.
Last point on that before we wrap up our primary questions is, one of the questions that we haven't talked about is the same question that I'm sure all of us have faced, but we don't want to address often. We always get asked, well, what's the revenue opportunity? Because at the end of the day, money is needed to maintain these programs, and that's always everyone's going to approach that differently. And there's this is also another area where we will all drastically have different opinions, and it's not really meant to have a discussion about it, but it is a topic that if you're not thinking about, yes, look at this university and this program they have, well, what's the sustainment model for it? Because we see universities that are dropping quite a bit of money into massive esports arenas, but yet they haven't taken the time to grow the grassroots energies on their campuses or connect with their students to input on how to develop it. And then they're like, look at this massive esports. If you build it, they will come, and they don't come. And so 2K actually, which has just come up, is a perfect example of this in the pro scene, where NBA said, we have fat wallets. We're just going to create an entire esports league. Well, the problem with NBA 2K is that traditionally, most people don't want to watch something they can watch in real life. And so the model is flawed just from a big standpoint. It's not that it doesn't have fans, but it doesn't have the virality opportunity, at least at this stage, as something that League of Legends has had or Overwatch has grown to have. Dota 2 is another one, which is a cult classic that is just insane and will never die probably. And so those are big conversations and big topics that if you're looking at, we have any viewers that are looking at how to start programs like this and how to do this, don't bank your entire presentation on look at what the industry says is that the fact that esports as a whole collective will trump the NFL in 8 years. That's the track it is. Yes, that's sure. That's statistical. That's how it looks. But that's the entire picture of esports. So you, as the university, the K through 12 entity, or the esports program that's getting investors and seed money, what's the revenue opportunity? How are you going to make this? How are you going to make money for the university? How are you going to make money for the organization, for the public school system? What's the tangible? What's the metric? What does my administration care about? You almost need that question asked to your administration before you start really focusing on your development, because if you don't have sustainment built into it, what you're going to do is you're going to bring students to your university. Your program is going to flop 2 years into their program, and now you just gave that student some debt. Now you've just sent that student down the wrong road, and it's pretty irresponsible. So I wanted to make that a point, because revenue is always at the core of everything. Money is always at the core of sustaining these things. Public, private school, doesn't matter. It's still driven by money, and we just have to figure out, what our universities value as the tangible payback and return on investment.
Well, that I know we keep saying last point, but okay. that gets to what I was kind of alluding to, but I didn't say earlier, with the need for governance at some point pretty soon. My school is much smaller than all y'all schools. We have, including grad students, around 2,100 students. One of the reasons that you see a lot of schools my size start esports programs is because the revenue model is recruitment. If we get 10 students that come into our school to play esports, that can have a financial impact on our university. If y'all's 3 schools do, it doesn't really, And that's where what you're saying, Mike, is so true, which is where the lack of governance with people that don't have administrative experience or don't have a boss who's helping to set the proverbial table in the right way becomes very, very dangerous. And that a school's like, wait a minute, we can get 10 to 20 students to come to our school for this program. Okay, cool. Let's make a giant esports arena. Not that all the schools that have made that are what I'm saying, but right. Let's make this arena, and then get the students there. And then exactly like you said, it might disappear. There are schools that have disappeared this year. Mm-hmm. There are schools whose esports programs have disappeared. So that's where it does become very, very dangerous and very, very irresponsible. I definitely agree with you on that. That's where senior administrators at universities need to talk to someone to understand what this space really is before they just start trying to throw money at it.
Right.
Dylan, Mike, any additional thoughts?
Yeah, at the end of the day, esports is about passion and fun, and I feel like the resources only make sense when students are able to have that passion, have a good time, and I think that's when it truly makes sense. I think if your program doesn't have that, or if it kind of lacks that connection to the university, it can easily lose momentum. So it's something that when you craft a program, it's very much something that you have to keep in mind and think about moving forward.
Okay, great. Well, that wraps us up for all of our predetermined questions. We have been keeping track of a bunch of different questions from chat, so we are going to go through them now. If you have any other additional questions, feel free to ask us in chat. We will add it upon. And guys, this is just open. Feel free to answer whichever one you want. So our first one comes at us from Warbuff2, who asks, do you believe there will be an increase in offline collegiate events and increase of interest in the StarCraft scene?
Yes, I think I think something that's really, really important to our program is to create a venue and create a space in which esports can take place in a physical location. It's really neat that throughout the semester we get to play all sorts of universities across the nation. But there's something that's just that much more magical, where you get to sit in an auditorium or a stadium and you get to cheer on your team. That's what got me into esports in the first place, when I got to go to a Dota 2 International and be in a giant basketball stadium and cheer on, my favorite players for Dota 2. That has always been what I consider true esports, is being able to go to a venue, a physical location, and be able to tap into that school pride. And I think that that's a really good target to truly shoot for, as far as like program as well as relationships between other universities in the area, is to create venues and opportunities for students to go out to a location and compete in front of real people.
What about StarCraft, Dylan?
We'll see. I think a lot of games struggle. A lot of esports titles struggle when they're personality driven, or like single, or like not a team environment. I think truly the games that embody teamwork and cooperation are the games that really kind of shine. I'm not sure. We could see StarCraft if they can really tap into like a 3v3 model. Maybe in the future, we'll see. I love strategy games, so if I could see StarCraft revitalize and come back, that would be amazing.
Backpedal.
Yeah, a little backpedal.
All right, so going on to our next question here is asked by alias_OW, which is, will any of us be doing any sort of recruiting through the high school level ever, or a partnership with the high school esports league?
I'll kick this off.
We already are.
Yeah, you guys, that's great. So for Oklahoma, we have some horrible analytics tied with our K-12 industry, like 46th or 7th in the nation, which is not something we're proud of. But this represents a topic where we can galvanize and power through. And so Oklahoma has their first statewide K-12 infrastructure kicking off here on the 18th of this month. So it's an exciting time for our backyard. And so I immediately reached out to that school, the school district in Tulsa that kicked it off, to partner with them to do production, because they hadn't thought about the casting element. Again, ways to educate everyone else to build it up. And so we're going to offer our students and our production teams to go and elevate the visibility of the K-12 energies, which will ultimately feed back into OU, but also help elevate for the other universities too that are starting to develop in Oklahoma, or also just bring visibility to the parents as just an educational exhibition opportunity. So those things will be continuously more and more feasible as everybody starts to elevate further and further. And I guarantee all of us are absolutely interested in K-12 because it's what fuels the future and the sustainment of our universities. Period.
Yeah, we're already doing a lot with high schools in the area. We're very lucky in the Dallas-Fort Worth area with what some ISDs are already doing. Like I know Burleson ISD has the Realm, which is a game design-based program that I'm going to get to go out there, I believe, next week to talk to them about that. But I've been emailing back and forth with them. I know Forney ISD, they have a program that and most of this is student-led, which is amazing to me. But Forney ISD, I know Arlington Heights High School is trying to put something together. There's a lot of schools in our area that are trying to build things. And every time I get contacted by somebody, I'm like, hey, let me know what I can do to help. Let me know the data that I collected. If that would help you in trying to get this started on your campus, please let me know. And back to kind of what we talked about earlier, too, this is what I love about the current esports space. I'm not doing that necessarily to bring these students to Texas Wesleyan. I'm doing that to help esports. So there's a lot of times where I've talked to students and I've been like, hey, did you know that Concordia has started a program, and maybe you could talk to Mark about that? Or I have the contact info for UTD, UNT, OU. Like, let me know what you need. I'm not doing this just so you try to come to my school. We've been doing a lot with HSEL too. That's one of the groups that we talk to a lot through our proposal process. And in the HSEL Discord a lot, just trying to connect with students. And again, not just trying to get them to come to our school, but like, hey, this is the kind of stuff you should be looking at. Hey, here are some schools. Maybe if you don't want to come down to Texas, here are some other schools in your area that have programs like what you're looking for, that kind of stuff.
Okay, great. Going on to our next question here. This is asked by Rabbit Bunny Ears. These have been easy names. I'm going to start to get to the names that are going to get worse and worse, and it's not going to be pretty, but I'm glad we have some easy names for now. And the question is, how is the female population in each of all of y'all's programs? It's a known thing that males are the predominant population in professional. Is it generally the same in collegiate? And if it is, how can we change that?
Such a good question, first of all. So one of the things that we do as an extracurricular opportunity to help bring visibility to our program is we have a media outlet. So SoonerEsports.org is a media outlet where we empower students to write articles and do event coverage and things like this to also help push our mission forward and also just educate anybody that's willing to read. Well, just last week, we had our editor-in-chief, who is a female journalistic major, write about gender equality in esports at all tiers, and some of the things that women deal with that are unique to them, that they feel are unique to them, and it does paint some perspective in regards to some of that if you didn't ever think about it. And I think for us at OU, my student leadership in that regard, the students at the top of the tier, I have 11 roles that are available for students, and of those, 5 of them are women. Now I feel that that's pretty rare, but also at the rest of the organization, then we start going back into the standard demographics or the traditional demographics that we're seeing in pro esports, where it is still heavily, not just a little male dominated, but heavily male dominated. And I think that goes back to just cultural support, and it goes back to us well before they get to our doorsteps. And these, again, are things that we will impact at our level and hopefully trickle them down through our K through 12 influence and kick them down through our just general influence in the areas, and saying that it doesn't matter about gender. It doesn't matter about any of this. If you can perform in whatever it is that you want to do in these topics that we support and produce, then that stuff is irrelevant. And everybody is susceptible to learning about this and sensitivity on it. And I'll make myself vulnerable to it this real quick. And the very first meeting I had with students, I had been lucky enough and fortunate enough to pull an Overwatch captain who was female. And I made it a point at that time to highlight the fact that she was a female, which is a big no-no, because the fact that she's gifted in the game is her accolade. Her gender is not. And it was just that flip in that way that it's phrased. Hey, we have, Kitrin, who's this amazing, Mercy at the time, Grandmaster at the time too, who happens to be female. And it's a much different delivery. And it highlights the fact that she has the skill set. And those are the types of things that, even just the way that things are introduced and presented and just talked about, can impact so much and have so much influence on people that we don't realize yet. And that's just us being aware of the ways that anybody, not just us, but anybody talks about these types of topics and just how it's presented. And I've learned real fast that you don't do that anymore. But two, it also, in that same way, the benefit is that it does feel more welcoming when you don't isolate and focus on that specific characteristic or any adjective that you might throw at somebody, highlight their talents, and then the rest is just extra.
I think finding ways to invite as well goes a long way. Sometimes, like for us, we only have one female player across all of our teams, but like Mike was saying, we have on our content creation team and our office staff, we have a higher representation of women. But finding ways to make sure that we're targeting our blast about recruitment, our blast about opportunities to get involved, not just putting it in general announcements and hoping that people's eyes get on it, but making sure that we target it on top of that too. That doesn't say to provide preferential treatment or anything, but making sure that we tell people, however it's packaged in the delivery, but like tell people, hey, this is a thing you can do. Are you interested in it? And not just hope that they see something and they think that might be a safe place for me to get involved, or that might be a thing that I would want to do, that I wouldn't have to deal with the stuff that I have to deal with in every other part of my life, the negative stuff. So I think the invitation becomes very important as well in how we package that.
Yeah, I think it's a gradual process, and I think if there were a group of players that could really change the landscape as far as gender representation in esports, I think it's a college campus that is predisposed to be welcoming and inviting, creates that kind of opportunity for us to get all different walks of life into competitive programs. And the fact that esports, there really is no inherent advantage, it doesn't matter where you come from or what gender you are, makes esports special. And I think while it's kind of a slow, gradual change, I think we are definitely seeing changes moving forward. I mean, like the Andromeda Discord that's out there for empowering female Overwatch players is awesome. There's a whole bunch of different resources that are out there that are helping people get further and further along their goals to see themselves on a starting lineup on a team. So I definitely think there's a lot of opportunities, and I think it's just going to take some time for it to truly take off and happen.
Great. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of it comes down to the idea of just being inviting to everybody and showing everybody esports is about everyone as the whole, and we want everyone who's passionate about it to get involved at any level they can. So our next question comes from Wash College Esports. And they ask, if any of your schools are non-scholarship esports programs, how do you fight off the negativity from high school students who do not think your program is viable, since there are not scholarships offered to play on your collegiate esports teams?
Go for it.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay, so for the students that we talked to this year, because at the moment we don't have scholarships to offer to students, what I like to focus on are, what is the experience that you're going to get on our campus, and what are you going to truly be a part of? There's definitely some opportunities. We have a pretty good Overwatch team, so if you're really into Overwatch, you get to be a part of something that's going to possibly get you a lot of that recognition that you might be looking for, that might go above and beyond what a scholarship can provide. So those experiences and the connection that you're going to get to this campus is definitely something that we focused on this year.
I think for me, hearing your question for the first time, I had a lot of thoughts. Basically, one of the things that I've learned a lot over my time recruiting for our program is the warning signs of behaviors that I want to avoid in potential recruits. And hearing your question, that triggered me. No. No, but I mean, it's one of those things that, yeah, I totally get that to some people, a school not having scholarships can be like, you guys don't even have scholarships. We have scholarships with my program, and they're too small. Just to be 100% honest, I wish I could give our scholarship students.
Can't win.
Wish I could give them more money. Yeah, no, it's one of those, like, even if you had the money to give scholarships, there might be different problems that are there. Even if you had money to give full rides, you're not going to be able to give full rides to everybody. So then, how do you fight the negative perception of, well, I'm not a full ride? It's just it's a trap.
Yeah,
it's tricky. It's tricky.
Especially like in the collegiate space, you're competing for scholarship dollars. So for like a university to provide a full ride scholarship would be like, all right, so what's the point after that?
Yeah,
So.
and especially one thing that's unique about it, especially at the collegiate level, is just the idea of, like, if you truly are only looking at a collegiate esports program because of their scholarships, there's just so many other things involved with it that a lot of it just takes educating those people about what's involved with it. Like, as an example, this past weekend, Dallas Fuel had their homestand weekend, and multiple students from our program got to go behind the scenes and work with the staff and be involved solely by being as a part of our program. One of our players, they got to go to the after party, and they were a VIP for working and being involved, and they got to meet every player on Dallas Fuel. And that's an opportunity that, because of programs like this that exist, completely separate from scholarships. So I think the benefits and the amount of things that you get to do because of these programs existing need to be highlighted more, and just show the overall benefits of just programs existing and being a part of them at any level.
All right. And I'll go back to something I mentioned earlier, is that it's education on every level. It doesn't matter. The conversation just changes, but there's so much that people need to realize about these things that all of you have mentioned. And for the university missions, it doesn't matter what university mission or university we're talking about. They always look at recruitment, retention, and engagement. And that's what they're almost universal core drivers are for analytic metrics to grade themselves on, because universities are graded on how much you retain your freshmen into your sophomores, and then those analytics that we have to play with as well. But that also goes into, okay, well, then that makes sense to invest into things that will help with the student experience to keep that engagement piece and that retention piece healthy. And so for us, it's also trying to navigate the pre-existing metrics of the university, as well as the opportunities that we're creating with our topic and how we assimilate and translate them in real time to go back to those missions questions, and then it's then repeating it back to the students in a way that is digestible and shows that value. But there has been plenty of stories that I've seen that students are university hopping because of their talent skill sets, and if that's what drives them, there's nothing that's going to stop us, but stop them. But at the same time, there is way more than just being on competitive programs. Period. I mean, and not just competing in that 9-man roster that TESPA allows for Overwatch. There's way more than that. My campus is bigger than 9 students, so let's create more opportunities than 9 of them.
Mm-hmm. All right, great. So our next question comes from Odeman74, who asks, when or will University Esports Club/teams begin hiring sports management-minded individuals in the near future to help pave the way towards a sports entertainment environment?
I'll kick that off. I think that's that 3 to 5 year mark. The job role makes perfect sense as to why we would hire that, but that professional isn't being groomed yet for that specific scope, because that's the mission, that's part of our journey. Some people will naturally be able to fall into those roles because they're accumulating skill sets that they didn't realize they had. And they'll be like, wait a minute, you mean I can apply these things that I've learned and this time invested and it translates to this? Yes. But the mission for us as a university is to scope that into a tangible, this is how we create this product, this professional, this person, this individual that can impact not just collegiate programs, but pro sector programs as well. And especially as we start to see more and more of the traditional sports franchises coming into investing in this with the NBA 2K League, Philadelphia 76ers, 100 Thieves and a couple other things like that, then that job role will evolve into being a very big necessity down the road easily.
Yeah, I think separately from the sports management, I think just it kind of goes back to the points made earlier about just the lines being blurred between traditional sports and esports. Like as an example, I had someone from our school newspaper, The Mercury, they were interviewing me. And one of the questions they asked is, well, what do you think about the mental health of professional esports athletes or esports players, and what do you think about mental health with just esports as a whole? And it's something to think about. Like if you compare a college or a professional traditional sports player, they have their team psychologists, they go through all the training to put them in the environment. Like sure, they're involved on social media and they're seen, but they're trained that way, and they're taught like this is how you deal with it, this is how you're supposed to interview, these are all these things. For a lot of these esports players, they're 17-year-old kids that just come out of high school that know nothing about the scene whatsoever. Then they get into their first pro match and they play horribly, and it's just nothing but flame everywhere and just on their Twitter and everything. And it's like, if you don't have that experience and you don't have that person to kind of walk you through that and talk you through that, it can be extremely daunting and extremely difficult to handle. And so that's where I think a lot of those lines between just sports management and just sports mental health will kind of correlate over to esports. People who start to draw those lines and see that there's a ton of similarities, especially in a way more digitally focused industry. Like if you make a bad play, you're not going to hear the end of it for a week. So being able to be trained to deal with those and handle those situations is going to be really important.
Yeah, there are definitely a large group of students in our program that come directly from sports management that have had a huge impact on the program at large. And I think there's a coincidence there. I mean, traditional sports have been going, pretty nice and strong for years. And there's a lot of things that they have figured out that can definitely apply to esports in a very positive way.
Definitely agree.
Okay, great. So our next question here comes from Andy D93X, and it's an interesting question. It is, do you think collegiate esports will develop players to be better than current professional programs, or where do you think the correlation is between the two?
I'll take the bite at this. So when we talk about the pro sector, again, I'm going to go back and correlate to traditional sports and the infrastructure from there. You get recruited out of high school, you get groomed through college, you get drafted into the pros. Now, I don't think that entire scenario needs to be mimicked here, but again, it's all about what's the easiest, lowest common denominator that's going to predominantly be the more successful method. And at this phase, that's one of the arguments and challenges is that we're talking about the students that are already in college or at least asking or knocking on the doors. There's plenty of students or plenty of youth and plenty of young adults that are like, well, I'm gifted enough in something in here, I can just skip this whole chapter altogether. And that's predominance of a big chunk of what the pro scene is comprised of, I believe. And so The change that needs to happen, or doesn't need to happen, but the change that I think will gradually happen goes back to that point you made in the last time, is that 17 or 18-year-old who hasn't been groomed on the business acumen, on the visibility and optics of themselves and how they convey, professionalism and things like that, which you can learn through advanced programs that can grow into, would create a better all-around package towards that pro scene. So if we talk about esports and the sustainability metrics of pro organizations, how many of your favorite players go and stream and they still are wearing the branding of the teams that they play for? That's not coincidental. That's probably contractual as a means to help convey and push the agenda of that pro esports teams. But if you don't have a means to have soft skills and help push that agenda of the organization that is giving you money or helping, give you a job and sustainability, well, you're not as valuable as someone who might be slightly lower tier, but does have that business acumen, those soft skills, and that customer service, or that soft skill, the ability to engage community. And so I think there will be a transition more closer to that 5-year mark, where you will start to see a little bit more convergence between people that are being plucked out of college into pros or completed into college into pros. And it's because of those things.
The way I look at it a lot with the high school college pro or high school pro for esports is very on a global level. In Europe, you think about Messi. Messi plays for Barcelona. Messi was signed by Barcelona when he was 13, 14. Mm-hmm. He made his professional debut when he was 17. He's widely regarded as one of the best, either the best or one of the 2 best players alive right now. His skill ceiling was very, very high, and he was provided a lot of opportunities at a young age that allowed him to go pro. Compare that kind of structure with America and the MLS. Most players in the MLS, most American players in the MLS at least, play club soccer, high school soccer, college soccer, and then go pro. The college thing is more built in here. From a lot of what I've read, a lot of the American players that go to college and then go pro, and this hits on exactly what Mike was saying, are better professionals than the people that a lot of times just come in when they're truly kids, when they're 12, 13 years old. So looking at, will collegiate esports develop players better than current professionals? I think it depends on what your metrics are. If your metrics are looking purely at skill, I think it can. The chances aren't as high in my mind. But you look at all the stuff that we've talked about, the soft skills, the communication, you can be the best player in the world, but if you're a raging monster to your teammates, you're not going to be as successful. People that get to go through the collegiate path, I think a lot of times will get to round out those skills they'll have a higher chance of rounding out those skills than those that just jump pro, like we were saying earlier, that don't have the education, the experience, however you want to frame it, to deal with loss, to deal with all those kind of things. Now, that doesn't mean everyone should go to college and play esports. The path is different for everybody. But I think the benefits that are gained from collegiate esports are less in-game and are more out-of-game, but they're out-of-game things that can directly impact in-game performance.
Yeah, I think in the short term, we're much more likely to create support roles for these teams. So players that have passion for esports or might be really good at esports, but end up either in a coach role or a management role or media content creation. And I think over time, as we as universities get more resources to grow and develop players, I think that can change. But I think in the short term, it might be a lot more support roles because, our students at the end of the day have to spend a lot of time, focused on schoolwork, whereas a professional team can have their players play 24/7 on their game of choice. But I think it'll be kind of cyclical. So as more students graduate from university programs, get into the professional scene, they'll know that their educational background helped them, and I think that'll gradually kind of like shape these organizations' perceptions on students that are coming out of the university.
I want to, because chat got really active with this topic, and I want to address two of the commenters on this stream. The first one being Warbuff, who talks about by the time most people finish college, they're already about the age out of esports. And that conversation spawned a couple of other small ones after that. But one of the things that I want people to start thinking about when they think about collegiate esports is you're basing that statement off the fact that universities have 4-year programs. Well, what's stopping us from changing our infrastructure to cater to that? And yeah, that's a hard idea to think about. But again, we're in the time before the NCAA, and not all programs are 4-year. Some are longer, some are shorter. And so there's other opportunities that have not even been thought about or even there because we're just not there yet. But that's the kind of open-minded thinking that this kind of topic demands, because there is no playbook. There is no playbook that Greg is writing that's going to completely be applicable. And that's reiterating that topic again, is that there is so much that we can do with this. And once the universities buy more and more into this, they're going to be more and more viable to being open to change and trying new things. We go back to the days of like the birth of universities like University of Phoenix, who had a completely online infrastructure. Well, what happened 3 years after that? Almost every one of our universities offered some kind of online curriculum at the very basics. And then, because I mean, when I first graduated high school in 2000, I'm old, there was no online school yet. There was none. And now it's a big model for a lot of universities. So these types of things can change as it caters to it. If there's money there, again, talking back to the universities operating stuff, if there's money there, they're going to try it at least once, as long as it can have a pretty solid business plan to move forward. And even not, universities try a lot of things that they probably shouldn't, but that's also on the responsibility of the person presenting it. So I wanted to hit on that because that's one of those opportunities where stop predefining this by things that pre-existed and start thinking about what can we absolutely do with this topic. And really, there is no boundaries once we have the case.
Yeah, one aspect off of that I find really interesting, especially when we talk about positions like ours, is if you, in a lot of the ways esports, if you have this high game knowledge and you have this experience, a lot of times if you want to be a coach, you aim to go for semi-professional or professional. But what makes the collegiate scene unique is you have to have a lot of these ideas about the high game knowledge, but also be able to lead people and know how teams are supposed to be done, how people are supposed to work together, and you're supposed to be able to have very goal-minded and objective-minded. This is what we want to accomplish, and these are the steps we have to get here, on top of all of the game knowledge. And and it's really interesting, especially at a collegiate level, because if you look at esports organization owners or coaches or any kind of things like that, a lot of times it's really only one game. You know what I mean? You're not going to see. You're not going to see, I don't know, a League of Legends coach go be, a professional league coach be like, oh, I'm going to coach Overwatch this season. It just doesn't happen that way. But for a lot of the things at the collegiate level, you have to be able to have not just all the game knowledge for all of those, but also being able to know how the teams are supposed to operate and kind of help build that team camaraderie and just program as a whole. So I think that's really unique, especially at the collegiate level. You're not just dealing with one game; you're dealing with pretty much infinite amount of games. And so being able to adapt and really learn as you go is super helpful. All right, so coming in here for our last question, we're going to wrap things up here for the night. And this comes from Rainstorm007, who asks, how do you deal with players who do not care about improving their skills and drag down the team's overall skill?
I think that, for one, I think that goes a lot into... or at least on the competitive level for our tier 1 or tier 2 teams, that goes a lot into our recruitment process. So it's really important that the people that we meet or the people that try out to our program, that we talk to them and kind of get a good kind of read on what are they going to bring to the table. And I think Greg had touched on this earlier in this session. But we look at a lot of soft skills, a lot of various things that go into, what does this person bring to the table? It's not just like their skill set, but also their mentality going into things.
Eugene, Mike, any thoughts?
I'll defer to Mike first because I know who asked this question, and I don't want to.
At this phase, again, to be completely blunt and transparent and just be realistic with this topic, who cares about collegiate esports right now outside of us? Like, who truly cares? And the students that are deeply involved in it. It's still siloed a bit, and quite a bit still. We still have a lot to educate in that. And so in that same context right now, while I'm not offering scholarships and I'm not able to demand performance out of students because of that lack of incentivization, The only metric that I set for my teams is you will win and lose as a team. And that, for a lot of people, even is hard to process, because losing as a team, for those that have not been in team structures, is hard for a lot of people. And they break down, and they get triggered, or they get toxic, because now they have people to blame and point fingers at, and they don't hesitate to do so. And I'm going to reference the first time that I got to interact with Dylan's Overwatch team, which was both beautiful and horrific at the end. Back at OP Live in September in Dallas, or in Irving. And we played UNC in the first match of the day, and honestly kind of wiped the floor with you guys. And then at the end of the day in the finals, you learned that our one-trick doom was just not enough. Pulled out that Sombra and completely wiped the floor with us. Went best of 5, and that third match, you figured it out. And you figured it out in a hard way. We did have a student that was getting triggered and was shutting down. That was the doom, because he literally disintegrated his whole world. But that's what he gets for being a one-trick, and that was a lesson learned. The conversations that happened after that were amazing to see, because they wanted to be better. And in that moment, though, in that one moment of loss, that team, despite that student being triggered, still clapped for you guys, still stood up, clapped for you guys, shook your hands proudly, came back 5 minutes after that, after the sting had worn off a little bit, and immediately went into seeing how to better themselves. And that's exactly what all of us want to see in collegiate program developments, in any team development. It doesn't matter if it's T-ball. Basically, this is my little T-ball team. I'm like the proud dad over here. It's just like, wow, they lost so gracefully. And they were absolutely proud that the fact that they put up a good fight, and they were bested because strategically we found a weakness in the bulk of the 16 or 15 other universities, but got called out on it. And so that was kind of a proud moment in that moment. But that's the only metric that I grade my teams on right now. Because if I have sportsmanship, if I have a student that's acting out on stage after a loss, and someone puts that on some media outlet I have no control over, wearing an OU logo on their chest, well, that doesn't help this program push further. So right now, all of us are marketing, all of us are visibility, all of us are viable for the responsibility of the image of our programs and the agenda of this topic, not just as our university entities, but as gamers, as competitive gamers in general. Because if one university administrator sees that another school had some kind of meltdown or something very publicly, well, they're going to automatically be hesitant to approach that topic, because it's so new, it's so vulnerable. It is very much like a little infant, and you have to kind of micromanage it a bit. And it takes a collective of us all to keep us in check, and to keep us, viable. I've had students that have caused some problems from other universities, and I reach out to their developers or their presidents and say, hey, this student is doing stuff on one of my student streams. Correct that. I've identified it. He's called himself out. He's made it viable. And they appreciate that. And that's what I love about this time too, is that that's a student that we'll deal with on our own, and it was resolved. And if it's not, well, we continue to push forward and look forward to that. But there's an accountability factor that we have for each other, even if we've never met, because the topic of collegiate esports is still so vulnerable, again, that all of us looking good on stage helps each other.
Yeah.
And I think a large
Well,
part...
I think...
go ahead, Eugene. Go ahead.
Okay. I think a big part of what Rainstorm is talking about too, though, is, and he mentioned it kind of in chat with the skill gap as well, is I don't think it's just a small school problem, but it's something that we experienced at Texas Wesleyan. For our Overwatch team this past season, we had people that had peaked top 500, Masters, Silver. That's tough. That's really, really tough. And when you look at how many slots there are on a team and how many people are eligible, your options are basically field a team that you can field, or don't and try to get better people. If you don't field a team, it's harder to get better people. If you do field a team and you're one of the higher skilled people that's getting dragged down by the lower skilled people, it's really, really frustrating when they don't care. Or at least when they seem they don't care, because maybe they do care, but they're not showing that they care. Outside of individual conversations and trying to work with them, there isn't much that can be done until more people are in the system to help increase the skill of the team. So it's kind of a snake eating its own tail in some ways, in that there isn't a magic snap your fingers to get results from that kind of thing. It's tough.
Yeah, and I think a large part of both of those, both what Mike and Eugene said is a lot of it comes down to setting the expectations right up front. You know, the second you walk in, they know exactly how the practice is supposed to be done, how you're supposed to treat your teammates, how things are supposed to be as a whole. And you know, kind of an opposite aspect of that I think is really interesting is you don't just talk about, you know, how they're supposed to act within a team, but as an example, if you have one of your players that goes in their ranked online system and just is super toxic and treats others horribly, well, now it just doesn't represent them. Now it represents your school. So now they're going to be like, such and such from UTD flamed me in my Overwatch game for doing a Brig 1 trick. And, you know, and that's going to come back to, you know, to the university, and it's a lot bigger. So I think a lot of it comes down to not just setting the expectations for your teams, but just for them as a whole, you know, explaining what is right, what isn't, you know, how you're supposed to treat others, how you're supposed to promote the industry, things along those lines, and just kind of establishing what is right and what isn't right away can really help a lot, especially in an industry and just, you know, esports in general is so digitally based. You know, oftentimes you hear the mantra that people are just hiding behind their computers in a lot of ways. So I think just establishing what's right and what's wrong, you know, day one really helps a lot for that.
Absolutely. And I think kind of the cool part about these varsities programs is that the students that are a part of them are leaders, and, you know, and they have to, and that just like, you know, somebody on the football team, they have to exemplify what that university means and what it stands for to a much kind of higher degree than an average student might have to. And so it doesn't matter whether they're, you know, at a physical location or they're online, they have to embody, you know, what it means to be a UTD student or a UNT student or a Texas Wesleyan student or an OU student, and kind of showcase what their university is truly about. And so I think, especially for kind of the gaming community, it's kind of a new responsibility. So there's, you know, occasionally some growing pains, I think, that we've experienced in, you know, in year one, as people are suddenly realizing, oh, wow, like, you know, I can't portray myself this way. I have to step up, and I have to be a bigger person than I was when I, you know, first walked into these doors to be a part of the esports program.
I want to bring on one point before we close this out, and the jobs that we have, regardless of where they fall in the university, regardless of offering scholarships or not, is literally the biggest Swiss Army knife ever. Like, we have probably called upon every skill set we've ever had in life to get this done, because we have to sell the idea, especially in the phase where you're not offering scholarships. You have to make students value it, and you have to sell that. That's not easy. How do I incentivize students to do things without incentives? I mean, think about that. And that's part of that motivator. And, you know, that's it. Yes, it's a new exciting opportunity, but you have to find ways to get that. And that's where you form that partnership, that collaboration with students that allows them to take ownership of it alongside us. And that is absolutely valuable when they can say, yes, I created this. I helped push this program at Texas Wesleyan along. I helped found and create the foundation of generations of UTD students from now until probably forever. And the same for UNT. And that's sometimes is a hard sell when you find someone who's talented. Like, every game has their little clicks, and every game, you know, like Dota 2 is always one. You know, Dota 2 is so cultish that kind of penetrating that community is really, really hard. And Dylan's a Dota 2 fan, so I called it out. But then you even have like Smash. Smash is another perfect example. Man, Smash is very cultish. I mean, those communities are long and old, and they're amazing. Their energy in them is so amazing. But having them aligned to bigger pictures is not an easy sell. And having them be a little bit selfless and tapping into their ability to help push your program further is not always the easiest task. And so to paint the picture of what we do, is the simplest answer is everything. We do absolutely everything. Things that you can and can't think of, we do it. And we have to get creative about how we do it. And all of us approach it different ways. And I met all three of these gentlemen in the fall last year. And in fact, we all met at UNT to kind of collaborate as a precursor to this. And I'm sure we'll do many more as other topics come together. And we'll add in more universities as they come up to this tier and help paint that picture and help push the agenda across. And I want to say that, again, that's an appreciation conversation from me to you guys, because now I have UNT to compete against. Now I have Texas Wesleyan to compete against, and UTD. But not just that. Now I have them to collaborate with. Now I have them as allies to help me push the agenda. Now I have them as resources to learn from. And that's That's one of the hugest resources. Almost all of us, I guarantee you, almost all of us, when we started, absolutely looked at those flagship schools that were ahead of us. Robert Morris University, Maryville, UC Irvine, Utah, Ohio. We knew about them. We heard about them. We saw them. And they were decently open with it. But they're now well past that phase and are busy because now they're executing so much. And so now come in the next generations of leadership coming into, okay, this is what they used as a model, or this is the model of what they've done. How do we make it better? And how do we continue to push it as part of that? And so this job is not for the faint of heart. I guarantee you, it's definitely not. And at this point, it's purely entrepreneurial. It really is. It's how do I create something from nothing and make it valuable and make people care about it? And that takes a unique and special individual once they truly embrace all the opportunities that we've talked about tonight. So I wanted to say that and say kudos to you guys. And I'm glad you're here alongside, and I'm here alongside you guys. Yeah. No, it's more like, hi, love, little hearts.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's about going to wrap us up here for our panel. We really want to appreciate all of you guys tuning in and watching and chatting. I don't think this will be our last one. I think we'll definitely be having more in the future. And the fact that you all tuned in and chatted with us really means a lot, especially because we really this is all just about educating and just getting the word out there about everyone's program and collegiate esports as a whole. If you're interested in following any of us on social media, all of our social media links for the most part are in the middle of the overlays you'll see on stream. Any last words from any of you guys over here?
Thank you.
That's the most awkwardest thank you ever.
Well, thank you so much for watching. All of us just completed our first full season as an esports program, and I'm really excited and really proud of what each university has accomplished this year. And I know all of us are working really hard so that next year will be even better for each and every one of us. And it's just going to create more and more awesome opportunities for students to grow and develop in the area. And just really proud of what each and every program has accomplished this year. It's really awesome.
Absolutely.
The point I want to make is that through collaborations like this and being open-minded and working together produces events like what UNT just hosted with League of Legends. And I'm sure UNT isn't going to just stop at League of Legends. Obviously, there's licensing problems, all the reasons we didn't do anything else. But those are all things that we can help tackle together and support each other. While we did talk, there's plenty of chatter about NACE, TESPA, CSL, and those things. Those national tournaments, sure, we're going to all participate in them. But what do you think has a little bit more weight right now, regional or national? Honestly, I think it's regional, because we can program what we can, and we can cater to the students in our pools. So events like UNT, I'm going to absolutely that UNT just had, I'm going to absolutely promote more and attend more and produce teams for, and then we can move on to the next universities and build this kind of ecosystem outside of that, where yes, we're involved in the kind of cornerstone staple tournaments that people talk about, but why not have our own new rivalry spawn? We have plenty of universities in North Texas in this region that we can absolutely kind of say, who cares about TESPA and CSL in a way? And let's focus on ourselves a bit, because that kind of big governance, when we all have our frustrations with CSL and our frustrations with TESPA and our frustrations with NACE, if you're involved in them, we all have our complaints, we have our struggles, and let's take ownership of some of that other things. And so I think we're going to see more of that. I'm absolutely working on getting OU hosting some big venue opportunities here, to help also offset some of the front-facing development that UNT has put forth, and just create other opportunities. I know UTD has traveled to Kansas and Tulsa.
Yeah.
And so, why not? I'm closer than those two. So why not actually do collegiate focused and invite absolutely every collegiate program, and then make it a bigger deal, not just competition, but let's do leadership mixers. Let's do, social. All these opportunities are things that are being thought about, discussed. And the only way that they come to life is where students say that we want these things, and that when students' voices are heard, or when students' voices are projected, then administration's like, okay, let's try this, because students are saying they want it, and you guys are already 80% done. It's just 20% of approvals and saying yes. Well, let's do it. So definitely support, if you're a member of any of these schools, or you are even a high schooler or a parent, absolutely support these programs, because it's not that they're going to ever die. It's just that you can help us push the agenda faster. They're here forever, I guarantee you.
Great.
My dad used to always tell me, let me say this real quick, Greg. I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead.
My dad used to always tell me the high tide raises all the ships. And that's what we're trying to do here.
Dang,
the
man with the quotes.
Hey, when
Killing
you're old,
me.
you got to have quotes, man. No, but that's true. That's what we're all trying to do. And I would encourage players at universities to do this too. Players in the high school scene as well. Like, what can you do not only to make your program better, your school better, yourself better, but those around you better? So everyone on the outside looking in can see what it really is that we're doing and can appreciate the work that the players are putting in, the work that the casters are putting in, the work that everybody's putting in.
Great. Well, Mike, Eugene, Dylan, I just want to thank you guys again for coming on this panel. It was a lot of fun. I had a really good time. I'm
Me
definitely
too. It was
excited
good.
for future iterations. And again, just wanted to thank everybody for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. Make sure, like Mike said, you really just get involved and just spread the word about the programs in general. And just if you tell one person about what you learned about today, that's making a difference. So thank you all again very much, and have a good night. Take care.
Good night.
Thank y'all.